I'd like to first of all introduce the author of the story that 310 to Yuma was based on, Elmore Leonard. And the star of the film, Glenn Ford. You know, I have the Laserdisc of 310 to Yuma, and we looked at it just a couple of weeks ago. And yet today, looking at this great 35mm print, even though the movie was very fresh in my mind, it still played with absolute tension and conviction and depth. And there's a lot going on in this film. Apart from the fact that it's the only non-musical I can think of where the hero hums the theme song. Why don't we start with Mr. Ford? Do you have any memories about making this film, working with Delmer Daves or working with Van Heflin, who was a good friend of yours?
Oh, yes. Of course, working with Delmer Daves was a joy because he was a fine director. I did 2 films for him. And of course, working with Felicia Farr, who I fell deeply in love with. And we were rather close. She ended up marrying my best friend, Jack Lemmon, which was fine. Now there's a real fine actor, Jack Lemmon. I have nothing but respect for him. About Del, we could have shot this in Telluride, you know that? Really, and how to see the country, it could have been very well done. There was no sets. It was all done on actually locations, you know. But my one big memory of Del, in my mind so clear, is that the first couple of days, Van and I got into we got into the roles and everything, and we thought we were doing okay. And I remember we did one scene. I forget, I haven't seen it for quite some time, but it was one of the scenes in the hotel room. And we did the scene. There was a lot of dialogue, and we finished, and we thought, well, and it went pretty neat. Because we looked at Dill, and he was crying. Tears streaming down his face, red face, crying. And hey, we must be really acting. And I think it was Van or I, and we turned it down. We said, okay, Del? And he said, it stinks. From then on, we learned not to look at Del after a scene. Because you couldn't, because that was Del, he just got emotionally involved. But when he said that, what do you say? We, another time, of course, I say this with great love of Delmer and his Mary Lou, his wife. Van decided that we were about halfway through, told me about the Senate, the United States Senate, had just invented a drink called I think it was a bull shot or something, where it's a lot of consomme or bouillon and vodka. So Van took me to lunch one day across the street, and from where we were working, and he introduced me to this thing called bull shot. Well, we drank the bull shot. It was nothing, drinking consomme. What's wrong with drinking consomme? So we drank the consomme, of course, and felt very good. We came back, and it was about 4 o'clock, I think, in the afternoon. And we get into this scene, and we finish it. We thought, okay, And Del said, print. That's all. We'll wrap for the night. Everybody go home. And I looked at, because we weren't supposed to finish until about 6 o'clock or 6:30 that day. And we went home and we realized, wait a minute, something's wrong. So the next day they showed the rushes. You'll appreciate this, Roger. They showed the rushes, and I have never seen such a devastatingly horrible display of bad acting in my life. I mean, the pauses you could run a train through, and between lines we just sat and looked at each other. And it was dreadful. I can't tell you, it was dreadful. So we, of course, my dear Van, and I said, please, Del, don't, he said, I printed it. I said, you're not going to use it, are you? He said, why not? And I said, well, and I think Van, I said, well, please, Del, don't use that scene. Let's do it again. He said, no way. No way. You did it. That's it. And so, of course, we all, both Van and I had vapors. We didn't know what to do. So, and I was telling Van, you're damn United States Senate bullshot. And Del was very smart, because at the end of that sequence, that was a long sequence in the room, all right, you two, I won't say the word he used, you two so-and-so, he says, I'm going to do it again, the thing you wanted to do again, but let this be a lesson to you. Don't ever, ever do that when you're working. So we learned a lesson. I never forgot that lesson. And of course we did it again, and it was, thanks to Del, but he kept that over our head all through the film, and every time, don't you think, Van said to me, gee, Glenn, what can we do to get it done again? Or I'd say to him the same thing. And of course Del knew all the time that he was going to eventually redo it. You couldn't put that on the screen. So he did it. But that was one of my big lessons from a very fine gentleman named Delmer Daves. And I did, as I say, we got along great, because otherwise I wouldn't have done the other picture. I think it was called Jubal with Del. This is one of my favorite films, although I don't have a cassette of it, Roger. I don't have any. And I wasn't going to sit in the back there and look at myself on the screen. So that's if you have any questions that I could answer, but don't ask me how to make a bullshot. And if anything I can tell you, I'd be delighted to answer anything at all.
Why did you want to play this character? Was so against typecasting in a way what you were doing in the 50s? You were usually
Well, that wasn't against typecasting. I think I played myself mostly through that. That's my big problem, you see. I'm not an actor. Now that may sound crazy, but I don't know how to put on beards and wigs and be another person. I got to play myself. When I did Superman, they put me in a wig, and we were up in Calgary, Canada, and I looked at it, and this white wig, and son of a gun, I looked like Beethoven. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And Dick Donner, the director, who was a very dear friend, Dick said, my God. He said, the producers wanted it, because I was supposed to be Marlon's father or something, like the baby, Superman's father, Super Baby's father. Anyhow, I had to look like Marlon, who looks great in a wig, incidentally. But they put that on me, so Dick said to me, well, we got to do something about this, because we're going to do the scene in about an hour. So he said, well, let's think. He said, all right. He said, don't worry. So Dick and I, we put the wig on backwards. And on backwards, you can imagine how ridiculous that looked. So when I walked into Salkin's office, he said, oh my, no, we can't have that, can we? And I said, well, this is the wig, you know. Of course, I didn't wear a wig. I wore the normal hair. But see, that's been my great luxury of working with fine directors like Dick Donner and Delmer Daves.
Before we get into complete Q&A, I want to get Elmore Leonard involved, who is now known as the master of American or the world's crime writers. Certainly my favorite living crime writer. That leaves a little niche there left for Raymond Chandler. But before you wrote about crime, you wrote a lot of westerns, including this one. And the copyright was Popular Publications. That would have been one of the pulp Western magazines, I assume. Could you talk a little bit about those days and about this story, which is not a conventional Western in any sense of the word?
Yeah, this was one of 30 short stories that I sold in the 50s. The first sale was in 51. This one came in 1953. It appeared in Dime Western, ran 4,500 words, and I was paid 2 cents a word. So I got $90. The first, my short story opened with Ben Wade being brought into the hotel. So for the picture, about 35 minutes was added onto the front end. And the ending of my short story was somewhat different too, in that it wasn't Ben Wade's idea that they jump aboard the train. He was pushed aboard the train. That was all of the short stories that I wrote were in the 50s. I've written 8 westerns altogether, books, novels. The last one was in '79. Some of the others were Hombre, with Newman and Frederick March, and Valdez is Coming for Lancaster, Joe Kidd, Clint Eastwood. But the reason I got out of westerns in the late 50s was that there was no market for western short stories. Most of the pulp magazines were out of business. There were so many westerns on television, 30 during prime time in a week, that no one was buying the books anymore. So I gradually switched over to crime.
You gentlemen both were involved extensively in westerns, and it's a genre that is now so unusual that whenever somebody makes one, Premier Magazine is sure to have a cover story about the gamble that they're taking. When Silverado was made, for example, everybody thought that people making that were crazy. What happened to the Western? How did this American art form, which when I was growing up seemed to be an absolutely permanent part of our national imagination, how did it completely disappear from print, from television, and from movies? Any ideas? Either one.
I'm told that they cost a fortune to make.
Everything.
Is one reason. Everything does, yeah. I think the picture Bullet had a lot to do with it. I think that from Bullet on, from that car chase on, picture has changed. You know, now we don't have the chases on horseback anymore, the car chases. And subsequent pictures, each one trying to outdo the other one in a more unique kind of a chase. And now we have bigger guns, automatic weapons going off that make more noise than the old 44.
You'd always be aware of these actors who play Western heroes or hero or whatever you want. They wear 2 guns. Forget it. Nobody wore 2 guns. If you didn't know how to shoot one, you didn't wear any. I hope that Westerns come back, and I hope they make it a simple. See, I think one of the nice, in compliment to the gentleman on my left, it was a simple story, 310 to Yuma. It was not complicated. It was a simple story. I've been around the world many times. I've sat in theaters in whether it's Bangkok or Tokyo, Kyoto, and the audience, you know, they sat so entranced by it. It was not translated, but they knew what the story was without any explanation. They knew who the bad guy was or the good guy was, and that's why I think they were successful in those countries where English was not spoken. I hope they come back. I'd like to do more westerns. Of course, I think I need a little smaller horse. But yeah, by that I mean, if you know, it gets a little more difficult sometimes to get on a large horse. Oh, I could do it, I guess. least I'd give it a good try.
You know, when you mentioned Bullet, it occurred to me here is a whole film about one man making a moral decision, and at the end of the film he makes that decision. In the movies, the action pictures that have replaced the Western, there's usually by the first half hour already a body count of 2 or 3 dozen people, and human life is not sacred. It seemed to me that in the classic Westerns they were to some degree about the sacredness of human life, and that maybe another turning point might have been The Wild Bunch, which I think is a very good film. It was the first film that kind of brought the violence of the urban film into the Western genre.
Very true.
I was hoping that... Oh, thank you. One genre that seems to be as popular today as ever is the film noir, which you, Glenn Ford, are very famous for. Many of your pictures, such as The Big Heat. And Elmore Leonard makes movies, makes novels, writes novels that could be filmed as film noir and should be. Why is that particular note that was struck by those films in the 40s and 50s still being played? Why are those films still popular, and why are they still being imitated all the time?
This doesn't answer your question, but I have to. This would be an appropriate time to say that about the time that 310 to Yuma came out, which was 57, I was still buttoning the top 2 buttons of my sport coat the same way Glenn Ford did in Gilda in 47, I think it was. Yay! So, that was one of my favorite movies. I think you might say a few words about Gilda.
Well, of course, Gilda is I don't know what to see now, 130 films. 130 is a lot of films, and Gilda was certainly one of my favorites because I deeply loved Rita Hayworth. Well, Gilda was a true story. We didn't do a lot of acting in that. We cared for one another. She was my next door neighbor, actually. And I should have, well, I should have married her. We were very close to one another. And what do you say about Gilda? I don't think it would have been as good in color, for example. I hope they don't colorize it. You know, you can, when a film is made in black and white, the method of shooting it, method of photographing it is done entirely different than they shoot a Technicolor. And when you colorize black and white, you take away some of the drama. The contrast in black and white is what makes it strong. And you don't take away the strength of a movie. And I shouldn't, you know, I guess there's people who know more about it than me, certainly, but Gilda was a very favorite. And if I start to talk about it too long, I'll probably start to cry. But you know what I mean. Your memories some are beautiful. And every memory I have of Rita is beautiful. So beautiful I can't tell you. So anyhow, that's about as much as I think I should say about Gilda. It was true.
You know, one thing I've noticed is that black and white pictures don't date the way color films do. When you look at an old movie that's in color, first of all, the color is likely to have faded, which is distracting. But apart from that, you make all kinds of adjustments based upon fashions, color choices, art direction, and so forth. In black and white, you have character, dialogue, and movement, and then you have the lighting. And so that on occasion, I turn, instead of watching colorized movies, which I would never do, I turn the color off on set and make a movie black and white. I know that's probably also a crime, but I've been known to do it.
No, good for you. Turn the contrast up, though, when you do that.
What you were saying before about the black and white pictures, the crime stories, I think they were hip, and I think there's still a lot of them are still hip. That when Robert Ryan threw the hot coffee in Gloria Graham's face, Lee Marvin, and she said, and someone said, "What are you gonna do?" She said, "I'll have to go through life sideways." You know, this lines like that seem to catch on time.
When you mentioned Fritz Lang, I did 2 films with Fritz. He was supposed to be a very, very, very difficult man to work with. And when I first was told by Mr. Cohen that I was going to do a film for Fritz, it was the Big Heat. I said I'd like to meet him first. So I was in, Benny Thaw, was it? Remember Benny? Benjamin Thaw at Metro? He probably ran Metro anyhow, but he was a marvelous man. He had me come in and meet Fritz. So I walk in the room and here's Fritz sitting there with his monocle, you know, leering at me sort of. And I walked over to him and I said, I can't use his words though, can I? We're not on the air, are we?
No, we're not.
Oh, okay. I said, okay, listen, you
Real
son.
rough and tough crowd.
No, I said, listen, you son of a bitch, I hear you're difficult. I said, don't you give me any problems or you're going to lose at least 3 of your teeth. And with that, I said, thank you, sir. I'll see you on the set. And I walked out. Well, believe it or not, I got along just great with Fritz Lang. I really did. You know, may I tell a Harry Cohen story? I think, you know, Harry Cohen was supposed to be such a mean, lying, vicious, terrible, terrible man. Well, I'd heard that, but don't forget, he put me under contract, and he was responsible for, you know, everything I ever got, because he believed in me. But I was never suspended, and we had our arguments, but I'd always take it up with him. In fact, he did something one time that annoyed me, and I went in, and he had a baseball bat in front of his desk there. But so long, signed by Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. And I got so mad, I walked into his office, I took the bat, and I crammed down on the front of him, and broke it in 3 pieces. And I threw it at him, and I said, don't you ever do that. What he did was, there's no point in going into that. So I was called back. He said, you'll never work on this lot again, you'll never work in this town again. I said something else rather obscene. Walked home, and when I came back, because I had to work the next day, I walked into his office, and here's the bat all glued together again by the prop department and shellacked. And I looked at Harry, and I said, hi, Harry, and I started to reach for the bat. He said, don't, please. And I looked at him, and I smiled. But a week before he died in Phoenix, Arizona, he had a heart occlusion or something. It was hard. And a week before that, I didn't know he was passing away, but he called me into his office. And this is after 16 years under contract. And it was Rita Hayworth, Bill Holden, and myself. We were his 3, he called us his golden triangle, because we never made a film that didn't make money, you know, Roger. So he said, well, you're leaving. And he said, the man at the gate told me, would you go up and say goodbye to Harry Cohen? Because I was leaving, my contract had run out. And so I went in and I looked at this little man, and by this time he looked a little smaller for some reason. And, but he was still the lion, and he sat there, and he said, come here, Glenn. And I went over and I said, Harry, I guess this is goodbye, and to shake hands. He says, Glenn, you know why I always liked you? And I said, no, Harry, no. It's because you were never afraid of me. That's the story. That's Harry Cohen. I really loved him. I miss him. Trouble is, we don't have enough of them around nowadays.
In your performance in this film, there's a little bit of the devil in you. You're a tempter. You've got Heflin up there, and you're working on him in many different ways, and yet at no point do you ever seem to try too hard. It's a very calm performance, very modern. We would say modern, which is the wrong word because actually most actors today can't do that. You say that's you when we look at the screen. Usually we're playing yourself. But this kind of evenness, this calmness, which you were able to bring, the collection, made you the top box office star in America, in addition to putting you into a lot of everybody's favorite pictures. Was that just something that you knew you had to do, or how did your acting style evolve?
Well, Roger, I felt that was the way it should be done, and I think I would have ruined the part if I'd have played it like an actor, you know? Because I played it as it would be in real life. You know, it's like if say take a line of a film, I'm going to kill you, right? That's the line, supposedly, right? And the actor said, screams out, I'm going to kill you. Forget it, Charlie. It's the actor who says, I'm going to kill you, quietly. Then watch out. See, underplay, learn, but don't underplay yourself out of a film. I got that advice from Spencer Tracy. I've seen actors actually underplay themselves out to these, who was he? What was he doing? What did he do? But he was, had a method, you know. Method actor. I'm not a method actor. The hell, even the telephone book has a method. But I never tried that method stuff. I just did, I don't know. Roger, who incidentally I have such respect for, asked a question that I find very difficult to answer. As one of your disciples, Roger, I can't give you a decent answer, and please forgive me.
Maybe I can ask Elmore Leonard a related question, because I'm in the middle of Get Shorty, your previous book before Maximum Bob, and your hero Chili seems to belong to the Glenford School of Acting. He's always telling other people how you can get people to believe that they have to pay you the money without telling them that you're going to break their legs. And Chili Burns, is that his name? Or Chili Palmer, likes to say to people, look at me. And then they look at him, and then he says whatever he's going to say in exactly this, I'm going to kill you, or whatever it is. You, in your books, are a student of the way people talk to each other, and the way that they talk to each other in order to get done what they want done, and the way that they talk to each other incorrectly in order not to bring about what they want to have happen. What school did you study this behavior in? Where did you see these people, and how did you learn from them in order to put them into your books?
Well, the purpose in letting the characters tell the story is I keep my nose out of it. Just as I don't think an actor wants to be caught acting, I don't want the reader ever to be aware of me. I don't want me to get in the way of the story. And I think it can happen too. There's so many ways it can happen. So I, as much as possible, tell the story in scenes with the dialogue moving the action. And I only use characters who can talk. They sort of audition in the early scenes. And some of them are either given a lesser role because they don't come up to the standards I think they should have, or is out of the picture, out of the story. I'll have a scene where two characters are talking, where one of them I think is going to be one of the main antagonist, but the person he's talking to is much more interesting to me. So the one I had planned on being important gets a lesser role, and this other guy comes along and stars. A very minor character who barely has a name comes along and pushes his way into the book. in through scenes where he takes the stage. He steals the scene. And it happens. It happens in every book. And this is the best kind of a character you can have. But in wanting to move my stories along with dialogue, I have, because of it, and because I've been doing it for 40 years, I do listen, and I am aware of the way people talk, because this is the way I want to do it. I don't think that I know any more about dialogue than anyone else. You hear voices in your mind, different types of voices, and that's all I do. I listen to them and use them.
I love the scene in this book where he's coaching the Mr. Zigzag from Zigzag Productions in how to shut up, and he won't shut up. He keeps talking when he ought to shut up. Let's let the Telluride audience interact with these two great guests with your questions, observations, comments, and so forth. Okay, up? Where? Just start talking. I can't see a person. Could you repeat that one?
Where did you start riding riding horseback?
Oh, when I was 12. I was Will Rogers' stable boy. This is a true story. I know it's ridiculous. But I was Will Rogers, and there's a lot of people who don't even know who he is probably, or was. But I was his stable boy. I worked for him for 4 years, and he taught me to ride. Incidentally, you've read in the paper and magazines about Will Rogers saying, "I never met a man I didn't like."
Right.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Right? Well, I was in the ranch house when he said that quote, and that isn't the quote at all. I was sitting right as near as I'm sitting to Roger. The quote actually is, and was, "I never met a man who liked horses I didn't like."
I remember when Joel McRae was here, who this year's festival is dedicated to, his first picture starred Will Rogers. And he said that on the first day of shooting, Will Rogers asked him to come out to lunch, and he said, "Young man, you're going to make a lot of money, and I have one piece of advice for you. Put it all on the property." So suddenly bought the San Fernando Valley.
Incidentally, the finest horseman in motion pictures was Joe McRae. Nobody could ever touch him.
Question? Just shout out, because we're...
Roger, you asked the question about what makes film noir last so long. It seems to be a perpetual genre. What is your reaction? Why do you think that might be the case?
One word, style. And it's the one thing that modern motion pictures so frequently lack. Movies are flat today. They're lit for television. They're pumped up in volume and in action. The characters become one-dimensional because they're simply instruments of the action. And so you sit there and you feel as if you're assaulted. The great directors who are working today are the ones who like the great directors of the past, have style. And the style is expressed not only visually, but also in the wit of the dialogue that Elmore was talking about, and the fact that characters are allowed to develop into eccentric individuals and so forth, and the lighting of black and white. The fact that the camera is allowed to tilt occasionally, the fact that they weren't afraid of shadows, the fact that they weren't afraid of unusual compositions. You look at a director like Scorsese, and he has that same feeling, but a lot of directors just seem to want to photograph what's going on. You know, most photographs, you see people in Telluride taking pictures with their cameras. 95% of all Kodak film that's exposed in the world consists of minute people in front of large, out-of-focus things. Because the average person doesn't know that you have to get close enough to see the faces in order to make a snapshot that you will want to look at more than once. The average director seems to also feel that he's recording an event in order to prove that it happened, rather than developing a visual approach toward it, incorporating a style that makes you know how to feel about it. And for some reason, film noir as a genre seemed to encourage that kind of style more than any other genre, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think. I know Elmore Leonard looks at 2 movies every night. Is that true? So you probably have an opinion too.
We sleep through a lot of the movies, though. And I think most of them were lit for television, which is a shame.
With
The answer is no.
I have a question for Mr. Ford.
Yes.
I watched you in the movies since the 50s, a long time.
Mm.
Great actor. What prompted you to get into acting? What was your primary motivator?
Well, I was a stage manager, you see, before I got into acting. And as a stage manager, I was in almost in the 50s, something like 50 plays. And as a stage manager and as assistant stage manager mostly, you have to understudy all the other parts to be ready to go on if somebody shows up ill or can't make it or misses the train or whatever. So you're ready to go on and do his part. And you learn the parts and you're ready. And suddenly I after, I think it was the Children's Hour or Golden Boy, one of those, when I was going on, I think I had, in Golden Boy I had a line, one line, it's a knockout, Lombardo stiff. That's all. And I was just but then I would go back to pulling curtains and running the lights and giving the cues. And suddenly I realized that a guy would show up, for example, you know, and he couldn't do his lines. Maybe he had 20, 30 lines. I'd go on and do them. And I suddenly realized this son of a gun was getting about 20, 30 times the salary I was getting. And all he'd come in and say these lines and go home, not stay for the final curtain even sometimes. And I realized that, hey, wait a minute, something's wrong here. So I started to say I was an actor, but I could be assistant stage manager if you need him at the last minute. So I got a lot of jobs that way. And that's how it started, you know. And I never thought I'd be an actor. I didn't particularly care for actors, in fact, just between you and me. Because they always had some complaint. Why is his dressing room on the second floor and mine's on the fourth floor? Why is his dressing on a carpet and mine doesn't have a carpet? Why has he got, terrible. And I say, I'll take care of it, don't worry. Just, you know, con along for a couple of weeks and you don't do a damn thing, you just let them sweat. So, and here I am an actor. I can tell you some funny stories. If we ever had time, I should tell you the time I was the stage manager, mind you, of the Oriental Burlesque House in San Francisco, where we had 5 shows a day, 12 changes a show. And I had to change, you know, and see that the sets were changed and the strippers went on when they were supposed to and the comics were done. And I won't take any more time, I'm taking too much time.
Tell us a story.
Well, I was 19, and my big job was there was a stripper named Tassels Latour. Now, Tassels was a real nice lady, actually, but my job was, after a final bump and grind, she'd start to take off the tassels off of her, you know where, and come off stage and come out and take a bow with nothing on. So my job was to stand there with 2 ice cubes. And I stand there like this. This is a true story for Ellen. And she'd come off the stage and I'd go like that. Count to 3. And she'd go back and they were standing up like, you know, very erect. It drove the audience crazy. And for a 19-year-old kid, a lot of people envied my job, but I was so busy because if I'd missed, you know, but I got pretty accurate with an ice cube. 2 ice cubes. True story.
I just want to say that you brought back the incredible crush I had on you for 4 years.
I was just wondering how you got from westerns to the novels that you write now, and you must hang out in the bars and the scenes where your characters hang out. Is this all coming out of your head, Mr. Moon?
No, I don't hang out. I quit drinking in '77 out of necessity, and I switched to crime novels out of necessity. I had to write something, and I've been writing to make a living all my life, one thing or another. In the early '60s, after I stopped writing all those westerns during the '50s, there was a period of about 5 years where I didn't write any fiction at all. I did write some industrial movies and some educational movies for Encyclopedia Britannica Films, and a lot of advertising, promotional stuff, just to all kinds of freelance writing, just to make a living. I've said that I've written everything but cocktail napkins. But finally, by 66, 67, I got to the point where I could subsist on writing just fiction. And then but I didn't really start selling until the mid-80s, 84, 85. And then the hook then was overnight success after 30 years, hitting the New York Times list, and interviewers asking then, do you resent success coming at your age? Well, you know the answer to that.
Would Mr. Ford say something about Cowboy, another fine Western, Jack Lemmon?
Oh, that was Delmer, no. That Delmer Days? I forget. Yes, we did that in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's such a long story. I don't want to bore you with that. How I got Jack Lemmon to do it, who refused to do a Western. He said, absolutely no. And I said, Jack, you've got to do this part of Frank Harris. It is perfect for you. As a kid who didn't know nothing about horses, nothing about riding, he wants to ride the range with the cowboys and the glamour of driving the cattle across the country and everything. And I said, Jack, you're perfect. He said, I've never been on a horse, damn it. I said, well, that's the point of the story. And so one day, there's a place across the street from Columbia called the Naples Restaurant. One day I took Jack across the street, and he decided I was gonna get him to do the part of Frank. And I played the part of Tom Reese, who was the head of the cattle drive. So I got Jack across to the Naples, and he liked to drink old fashions, or no, what was it? Manhattans. So I instructed the bartender to load his Manhattans as much as they possibly could, and put nothing but syrup and water in mine, and a cherry, of course, you know. And Jack sat with me, and we started reminiscing about all kinds of things, and he's drinking, you know, and I'm drinking, you know, and sipping, and when I get down to the end, if there was a little left, I'd pour it in a plant behind me. I wonder if that plant died. Jack was finally to a point where he literally couldn't hardly stand up. And I knew that was the time to put the knife in. And I said, Jack, you're yellow. You're yellow. You're a yellow so-and-so and so-and-so. You got a part that you could do and do well, and you're scared of horses. What's the matter with you? You know. Well, of course, Jack said, what are you talking about? I'm yellow. I said, you're yellow. You're yellow. You just don't know it. Have you ever looked in the mirror at yourself? Do I look kind of yellow when you look in the mirror? Hey, what are you talking about? He's really, you know. So I said, all right, if you're so brave as you seem to feel you are at this moment, go over and tell Harry Cohen he'll do the part of Frank Harris. He's in his office. He says, yeah, where is he? Lead me to him. Well, of course, I get Jack up, and I don't know how we crossed Sunset Boulevard, but we did. When we got to Harry's office, and I knocked on the door and went in, oh, there's another marvelous story about Harry Cohen. Why all the paint's rubbed off around where you push there's a buzz and you push the door open to get to Harry's office inside, you know. But all the paint is worn off where the push plate should be. I pointed that out to Harry, and he said, don't ever anybody paint that door. He says, that's the escutcheon of Columbia. Sweating palms pushing in to see this giant eating the paint off. So of course I got in the office and I said, Harry, Jack has something he wants to say to you. He wants to do the part of Frank Harris. Of course, Harry knew what I was doing. He's fine. Put your name here that you agree. So we put a pen in poor Jack's hand, and he wrote Jack Lemmon. And he says, now, you see him out of yellow now? And he said, no, you're not yellow, Jack. You're going to do a fine job. Well, I got him, I called a friend of his to put him in a car and take him home. Next day Jack called me, he was absolutely furious. He called me every name, and well, he finally ended up calling me the Great Stone Face, because I would look at him, and supposedly with pity, and I'd just look at him. He fell off the horse one time, and I just let him stay on the ground. I just looked at him. And I said, when you get up, get back on the horse. He said, you son of a bitch, you're great sorry, get on the horse, and he's hurting so bad. And I knew, but it was great for the film, and that's why he did such a damn good job in Cowboy. And since then, not how he's my best friend, I don't know, but boy, you should invite him here someday. And he's a great guy, a great man. But that's the main thing I remember about Cowboy. Working with Jack, fine professional. There's a real actor. Did you see him in Dad? Oh my gosh, that was great. Any other? I think we've taken up enough of your time.
A film called Sheep Man.
Oh yeah.
That was really popular.
Well, that's another long story which I don't think we have time for. But that's one of my favorites, with Shirley Maclaine. That was Lord Louis Mountbatten's favorite story, a film. Lord Mountbatten, who later told me he had a violent crush on Shirley Maclaine. He adored Shirley. And I'm to meet the Queen one day, and we're in this reception line, and Joan Crawford is with me, holding my hand, and we're being led up, and just as we get from here, about 20 feet away or so, a man steps out from behind the receiving line, about 6 or 7 people, with all gold braid up to his elbow and medals and everything, and it's Lord Mountbatten, and he's going, psst, 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 like that to me. And I said, Joan, I think Lord Mountbatten wants to talk. She said, don't you leave my hand. You son of a bitch, don't you stay right here. Don't you move. I said, Joan, it's Lord Mountbatten. I can't say that. Lord Mountbatten, and she grabbed her, and she was a strong woman. And I finally, when she relaxed a little bit, I took my hand away and I walked up to meet him, and he says, come here. So we went into a little we're running over. Oh, we went to a little anteroom off there, and he said, sit down. He called me the sheepman. In England, it's not the sheepman, it's the sheepman. And he said, you did a trick in that where you had I have to show you, I put a whiskey glass, I put 3 poker chips here, and a whiskey glass, I flip them up, draw, shoot the poker chips, the whiskey glass comes out, and it's right on my hand like that. Well, now you're not sitting in pot, that doesn't happen. But I explained to Lord Mountbatten how they put the little piece of wood here and a thin piano wire going up, and the prop man held on to it, and he had another glass, so I'd throw it up, and I'd shatter the chips, of course, and the glass would come right back on the wire. And then there was another scene which they cut where I shot a lima bean, but it was like this. There's a lima bean, a dried lima bean. Throw the lima bean up and I go, boom, shatter the lima bean. I turn my back, throw the lima bean up, boom, lima bean. How do you shoot that well? It's impossible. Until I told Lord Mountbatten how it was done. Instead of putting one shell in the one bullet in the shell, it was filled halfway with BB shot, fine BB shot, so that when you fired the gun, it had a spread of 12 feet. So you could do this, boom, and in other words, it's impossible to miss. You could I could be talking like this now, and you could throw me another boom. The damn thing would explode. Well, of course, Mountbatten, he thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So he said, I'm going to put the boys on it. I'm going to show the boys at Sandhurst, which is a military. I think it's like their West Point or something. Yeah, it's a military. But he did the demonstration, and he astounded these men and officers. And of course, they never could figure it out. He ended up throwing lima beans. And to this day, until that horrible day that he was murdered, I don't think he ever told the story of the trick. So now I urge that none of you tell that story of how it's done. So if ever you see anybody do that, boom, you know the damn gun is full BB shot, not one shell. This is a true story. Because I'm, well.
Is our time all gone? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Elmore Leonard and Glenn Ford.